Good morning. It's Friday, the 17th of January. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast coming to you from Arirang's news centre in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The leaders of Korea and India agreed to expand their trade and investment relations by enhancing their economic partnership deal, with President Park seeking India's support for Korean firms taking part in the South Asian nation's infrastructure projects. A day after threatening nuclear war if South Korea and the US go ahead with their annual military drills next month, Pyongyang proposes the two Koreas stop trading insults and carrying out military drills in the region. Seoul maintains the drills will take place as planned. Plus, global competition among tech giants is expected to heat up this year, with Samsung and its main rivals rushing to introduce new wearable devices and state-of-the-art TVs. We begin in New Delhi, where President Park Geun-hye held summit talks with the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on Thursday. The two leaders agreed to upgrade their trade agreement as soon as possible and take necessary measures to nurture a favourable business environment for investors in both countries. Our Oh Jun-ju, who is travelling with the President, sent us this report.
President Park's visit to India aims at laying the path for Korean firms to more easily enter the world's second-largest market by population. One of the most notable accomplishments of the summit talks between President Park and Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh on Thursday was the two leaders deciding to quickly upgrade the Korea-India Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, so that it covers not only goods but also investments and services.
한인도 포괄적 경제 동반자 협정 개선 작업을 가능한 빠른 시일 내에 완료하기 위해 최대한 노력하기로 하였습니다.
The two countries will be holding ministerial-level talks on the matter in March. Both leaders also agreed to revise the tax treaty between the two nations to reduce the tax burden on Korean and Indian companies operating in each other's countries and to prevent double taxation.
양국 간의 투자 확대 및 영업 환경 개선에 중요한 토대를 마련한 것을 의미 있게 생각합니다.
President Park has also sought an expansion in financial support for Korean firms willing to take part in infrastructure projects in India, part of its 5-year development plan, with MOUs having been signed between Korea's Exim Bank and Indian financial institutions. POSCO's stall project to build a steel mill in the Indian state of Odisha looks like it's finally back on track, with President Park securing promises from the Indian government to resolve the obstacles that have been blocking progress for roughly 9 years now. The Korean steel giant was granted an environmental clearance for the 2,700 acres of land required for the project and also secured a promise from the Odisha state government to grant POSCO a prospecting license for an iron ore mine some 300 kilometers from the steel mill. On Friday, President Park will attend events that are focused on cooperation in the sector of the creative economy and meet with Indian business leaders to call for further investment in Korea. Oh Jun-ju, Arirang News, New Delhi.
Now to two starkly different messages out of Pyongyang in the space of just 48 hours. On Wednesday, the regime threatened a nuclear war on the Korean peninsula, but on Thursday, it proposed easing into Korean tensions by the end of the month. But, as usual, there were strings attached to the North's latest offer, as our Kim Hyun-bin explains.
Instead of issuing yet another blanket threat against joint South Korea-U.S. military drills, Pyongyang chose a different tack on Thursday. They proposed that both Koreas stop any actions that could stoke tensions on the peninsula, starting January 30th. North Korea's National Defense Commission made a proposal through the Korean Central News Agency on Thursday. The statement said that both Koreas should begin reducing tensions starting with the Lunar New Year holiday, especially surrounding 5 border islands in the West Sea. The commission also said it would be open to holding reunions for families separated during the Korean War and resolving other matters of contention, if, and only if, South Korea cancels joint military exercises with the United States that are scheduled to begin late next month. Thursday's appeal stands in stark contrast to comments out of Pyongyang on Wednesday, when the regime threatened to attack the South if the Joint Key Resolve Full Eagle drills begin.
Inter-Korean ties will plunge into a deadlock, and an unimaginable holocaust and disaster will follow should South Korea and the United States go ahead with their nuclear war drills and military provocations.
Seoul answered with its own promise on Thursday.
We will sternly retaliate against North Korea if the North carries out military provocations.
There's yet to be a response from Seoul over Pyongyang's latest proposal. But speaking to reporters on Thursday, Defense Ministry spokesman Kim Min-seok said the annual South Korea-U.S. drills will go on as planned between late February and April. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And following the North's proposal, the South Korean Presidential Secretary Advisor Kim Jang-soo held an emergency security policy meeting late on Thursday Korea time to discuss how to respond to the latest development. Details of that meeting will be announced later on this Friday. South Korea is to launch a new task force to boost economic cooperation with North Korea and Russia as part of President Park's Eurasian Initiative policy. Seoul's foreign ministry says the task force will launch as early as next month, with about 5 government officials reviewing various joint economic projects among the 3 nations. The projects include construction of railways, roads and pipelines that could eventually run through the 2 Koreas and Russia. It added the 3-way cooperation could help encourage the reclusive North to open up and eventually improve inter-Korean relations. Now, in a landmark step that will substantially increase international pressure on Japan, the US House of Representatives has passed a bill addressing the issue of Japan's use of wartime sexual slavery. It marks the first time the matter has been included in US legislation. Hwang Sang-hee has the details.
U.S. lawmakers are formally calling on their government to pay more attention to the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during the Second World War. In a document attached to a spending bill for 2014, the U.S. House of Representatives makes note of a 2007 resolution on the comfort women issue and urges the Secretary of State to encourage the government of Japan to address the issues raised in the resolution. The 2007 resolution calls on the Japanese government to issue an official apology for its wartime sexual enslavement of women. An estimated 200,000 females, mostly Korean, were used as sex slaves by the Japanese army in the early 20th century, and many are still waiting for an apology from Tokyo, although time is running out for the aging victims. The bill passed on Wednesday is not legally binding, but is highly symbolic of Washington's efforts to address the matter. It marks the first time the comfort women issue has been included in U.S. legislation and is sure to ramp up pressure on the Japanese government. Korea's foreign ministry welcomed the bill and reiterated its calls on the Japanese government to apologize for its wartime crimes.
The Japanese government must humbly admit the universal crime of violating women's human rights that were committed during its imperial period and resolve the issue. I once again strongly urge the Japanese government to do so.
Although the bill still requires Senate approval and a signature from President Barack Obama, Seoul's foreign ministry said that the bill is a sign that the comfort women matter is no longer just a regional issue, but a global one. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Korean banks plan to increase lending to small and mid-sized firms this year as the economic recovery gains pace. The Financial Supervisory Service says that lending to smaller businesses would rise by around $33 billion this year. That's up 27% from last year. The financial watchdog cited a more positive outlook for the Korean economy as the primary reason for the uptick in loans, as more firms will seek financial assistance for investments on the back of rising demand. The bank's move is also in line with President Park's drive to protect the financially vulnerable and expand support for small firms. The Korean government has announced new plans to support the commercialization of research and development. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning says it will invest nearly $850 million into the sector by 2017. In an attempt to boost competence in the sector, the ministry will establish a commercialization platform that propels the transfer of technology. The ministry forecasts that in 4 years, the sector will create added value of nearly $900 million. With the once red-hot smartphone market settling into slower growth now, the information technology industry will have to explore new frontiers this year. In the last of our 5-part industry series, Yulian tells us what's up and coming in the IT industry.
2014 will be the year when wearable technology takes off. Samsung burst onto the smartwatch scene last year.
Hey, pretty lady.
But the electronic giant's tagline haven't really worked with consumers. The company recently rolled out an upgraded Galaxy Gear smartwatch that allows users to control home appliances by remote. And with the Apple iWatch and Google Glass due to hit shelves this year, the stage has been set for a fierce competition to win consumers over with the latest wearable gadgets.
We need to build our own software for wearables. While Samsung's smartwatch is powered by Google Android, Google Glass uses its own software.
Korean companies are also jumping into another hot battleground this year, the so-called IoT market, or Internet of Things, connecting objects to objects. Take this service, for example. Press a button on your smartphone, and your car engine starts. If someone tries to break into your car, an alarm goes off in the car and on your smartphone.
By combining our IoT technology and a car servicing company, we've created a new service that allows you to monitor your car wherever you are.
Now, there's a familiar area in which electronics companies will try to make a comeback, and that's TVs. Ultra-high-definition TVs, to be exact. Ultra HD TVs offer 4 times the resolution of regular HD TVs, and the technology is expected to be the main driver of TV sales this year, especially with the upcoming Winter Olympics and World Cup. IT products by Samsung and other Korean companies were major contributors to the Korean economy in 2013. Exports of IT products reached a record high last year, making up nearly a third of the country's overall exports. But Korea faces new challenges this year, with smartphones no longer considered a safe cash cow. The big question is, will Korean players remain as movers and shakers of the industry? Yulian, Arirang News.
4 leaders of the State Rail Companies Labour Union have been formally detained for further questioning for their alleged role in organising the nation's longest ever rail strike. The 4 co-rail union members, including leader Kim Young-hwan, were put under detention immediately after the Seoul Western District Court approved the prosecution's request for arrest warrants. The judge says all 4 played key roles in the 22-day strike, and there was concern they could try to flee or tamper with evidence. The court dismissed the prosecution's request to issue warrants for 5 other union members. 13 union members voluntarily turned themselves in on Tuesday after defying police summons and taking refuge in several groups in different locations, even after the strike ended on December 30th. Now, turnout was low, but the roughly 40% of Egyptians who did head to the polls this week overwhelmingly backed the interim government's new constitution. State media reports around 90% of those who voted approved the constitution, which guarantees freedom of beliefs, equality between men and women, and bans political parties from being formed based on religion, race or geography. The outcome nudges Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi a step closer to running for president. Experts say Sisi, who is extremely popular among his supporters, appears the only serious candidate, but he hasn't yet indicated whether he will run. A decree is expected within the next few days, setting the date for presidential and parliamentary elections. Russia has reiterated calls for Iran to be involved in the upcoming Syria peace talks set to open in Switzerland next Wednesday. Meeting with his Iranian and Syrian counterparts in Moscow, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia, Iran and Syria share common ground with the United Nations on resolving the Syrian conflict. He also sought to play down claims that Russia was hatching a secret trilateral project with Syria and Iran. The US and Britain are partly object to Iranian participation in the talks. US Secretary of State John Kerry has again called on the members of the Syrian opposition to come to Switzerland next week. The Syrian National Coalition, which is rife with internal divisions, will make its decision on this Friday. The Roman Catholic Church has come under unprecedented public questioning by the United Nations over its past child sex abuse scandals. In testimony to a UN committee in Geneva on Thursday, several Vatican officials, including UN Ambassador Archbishop Silvano Tomasi, expressed remorse over the scandals and said such crimes can never be excused. They also said the Church had learnt from its mistakes and had taken action to prevent future abuse. Many activists remain unhappy, however, saying there were no clear answers on the questions like how child abusers were punished. The panel also criticised the Vatican for not revealing any specific information about past incidents. Now, a group of ambitious young Korean students got the opportunity to join a model United Nations conference this week where they tackled various global challenges like the pros. Ji Myung-gil was there to witness future leaders in action.
A model United Nations conference was held in Seoul Thursday to discuss some of the world's most pressing issues: world hunger, access to education, and climate change. Each participant represents a country and puts their own agenda on the table for discussion. The World Federation of United Nations Associations has prepared this program to give young people the opportunity to explore global challenges.
And this youth forum really aims to give youth an opportunity to learn more, to get inspired, and to also acquire some skills that are necessary to meet those challenges.
5th to 12th grade students have gone through 1 week of training led by professionals from international organizations, NGOs, academia, and other relevant fields.
Through their participation in this program and in Model United Nations, students have learned about the United Nations and its work in sustainable development and achieving the end of poverty.
Ways to tackle world hunger and poverty was the most debated topic. The students agreed that extreme hunger and poverty affects one's access to education, health, and protection. They also drafted resolutions that would provide small loans to individuals living in poverty in order to help them become economically self-sufficient. As well as this, the students drafted initiatives to provide less developed countries with strategies to implement their own homegrown school feeding programs.
I represent the delegate of Mexico, and the educational environment in Mexico is really good. Through this youth forum program, I learned that our opportunity in Korea is so better than other developing countries.
The students said they were able to gain a greater understanding of how the UN works and the challenges world leaders face when approaching global issues.
Through this conference, these young people had the opportunity to convey their thoughts on how to deal with the world's most pressing issues. And who knows, maybe one of these students could follow in the footsteps of Korea's most well-known diplomat, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
CCTV security cameras are used extensively here in Korea, whether you like them or not. But actively responding to the millions of video feeds in real time has been practically impossible until now, as our Paulie reports.
In the blink of an eye, a woman screams out as she's struck by a car on an empty street. Her cry for help is heard by a CCTV camera, which instantly sends an alert to an emergency response center. An ambulance and nearby police are then immediately dispatched to the hit-and-run scene, which would have otherwise fallen on deaf ears. This simulated accident demonstrates a newly developed technology that combines advanced sound detection with security cameras. Suspicious or threatening noises are identified much like an audio fingerprint, prompting cameras and authorities to quickly hone in on the sudden activity.
The sound source is analyzed through a sound database based on its frequency and feature characteristics. We are then able to determine whether the sound is a scream or even a car explosion.
The new smart cameras aim to relieve the burden on municipal dispatches that typically assign a single person to monitor an average of 130 security monitors. The sound-sensitive CCTV cameras were first launched last month in provincial areas under a pilot program. Following the completion of performance tests through the second half of this year, the government plans to actively adopt the next-generation monitoring system in early 2015. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
The Academy Award nominations often throw up a few surprises, good and bad, and this year is no exception. David O. Russell's American Hustle and Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity both received the most nominations with 10 nods each, followed by 12 Years a Slave with 9. The star of 12 Years a Slave, Chiwetel Ejiofor, is one of this year's nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role, along with Christian Bale for American Hustle, Leonardo DiCaprio for Wolf of Wall Street, and Matthew McConaughey for Dallas Buyers Club. Many fans were shocked to see Tom Hanks miss out for his role in Saving Mr. Banks, although his co-star Emma Thompson was nominated for leading actress. The 86th Academy Awards takes place on March 2nd at the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles.
Well, anyway, now here you are.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off in the LPGA. Now, the FIFA World Cup might be taking place in June, but what they call the Women's Golf World Cup, or the LPGA Solheim Cup, will take place in July. And to no surprise, Korea is seeded number 1. Now, with 8 different nations facing off in July, Korea has been seeded first thanks to a team that's comprised of world number 1 Park In-bi, 5th-ranked Lee So-yeon, 7th-ranked Chen Ah-yeon, 10th-ranked Kim In-kyung, and others. With the combined ranking point of 23, it's 14 points lower than the United States, as Korea hopes to take the title at the Solheim Cup. And moving on to football, the South Korean national football team is off to a good start in the new year as they jump up 1 spot in the latest FIFA ranking. After finishing off the 2013 season ranked 54th in the world, Korea moved up a spot and is now ranked 53rd in the world. The current ranking is the 3rd best in Asia after Iran, who's ranked 34th after moving down a spot, and Japan, who's ranked 48th after moving down a spot as well. Meanwhile, the top 25 nations were left unchanged. And now moving on to some Thursday night's KBL action, the Incheon Itilan Elephants were able to hang on to beat the Jeonju KCC Aegis in a close match, 79-75. Meanwhile, with the Seoul Samsung Thunders taking on Busan KT Sonic Boom, let's take a look at the highlights. Now, first quarter of the game, a very close one with KT taking a slim 17-15 lead. But the second quarter of the game, Cho Sung-min's 12 points in the quarter helped KT storm into halftime with a 43-32 lead. Things continue to go downhill for Samsung in the second half of the game as 7 different KT players score in the third quarter as they outscore Samsung 28-9. As they cruise through rest of the way, 90-62, your final score. And finishing things off with some V-League action from last night, led by Bethania de la Cruz de Peña's 34 points. GS Caltex dominated Korean Expressway 3-0. Meanwhile, with LIG Graders taking on Russian Cash Vespid, let's take a look at the highlights. Now, first set led by Arpad Baroti, Russian Cash easily takes the set 25-19. But the next 2 sets, LIG answers back with 25-23, 25-22 set win as they're 1 win away from win number 7. But Russian Cash not going down easy in this match as they take the 4th set 30-30 before taking the 5th set 16-14. With Arpad Baroti finishing off with game-high 33 attack points on the night as Russian Cash takes this match 3-2. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all for now. Thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll be back at noon Korea time, but in the meantime, you can always catch up with what's been happening on our website, which can be found at arirang.co.kr/news.